Hey y'all, welcome back to another doll customizing video. Today we're actually going to be finishing out my Rainbow Fairy series with the pink flower fairy, which is very exciting to be able to say. This one is a little different because usually I film these intros before I start working on the doll, and the doll's actually finished right now. You might be able to see her feet poking out up here. I ended up having the base doll that I used for the pink fairy at the same time as I had the base doll for the purple fairy. All the other fairies, like, I would finish one, get the base doll for the next one, and then finish the next one, and so on and so forth. But this one I was working on the pink fairy and the purple fairy at the exact same time, and I just didn't realize how quickly the pink fairy was gonna go, so I finished her before I ever filmed an intro. So a little bit different, but I guess not really in the grand scheme of things. That's just kind of like a little bit of behind the scenes information for you guys. But yes, we are going to be working on the pink flower fairy today. So if you haven't seen any of my other doll customizing videos in this series, it's the Rainbow Fairy series because each one corresponds to a color of the rainbow and then also an item in nature that is commonly that color. I know, very complicated, because why would anything be easy with me? The example I always give to try to explain that a little bit better is that the red fairy was the red berry fairy, because a lot of berries are red, and then the pink fairy that we're doing today is the pink flower fairy. Obviously flowers come in all different kinds of colors, but I haven't done a flower fairy yet, and I thought that this fairy series definitely needed a flower fairy, and pink is just as good a color as any other one. So yeah, we're doing the pink flower fairy today. It's gonna be super fun. I do have to give the disclaimer in like audio format. I always have the text one at the beginning of this video, but this is an adult craft. Doll customizing does involve chemicals and sometimes heat and sharp objects and all kinds of stuff that you probably shouldn't be dealing with if you're not an adult. So if you are an adult, definitely be careful if you decide to emulate any of the techniques that I use in this video. And if you're a kid, ask an adult to help you so that you are not doing dangerous things all by yourself. But with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and venture forward and look at how the pink flower fairy came to be. For the pink fairy, we are actually starting with just a head. Those of you who have been following the series will probably remember this Claudia Wolf head from my video on the yellow fairy. In that video I used Claudia's body, but used a different head because I felt the smile on this mold didn't fit for that project. But for the pink fairy, the smile is perfect. We can worry about a body later. For now, I start with removing the yellow hair. First I go in with scissors, cutting off as much hair from the outside as possible. Then I go in through the neck hole with pliers and tweezers to remove the rest of the hair plugs and glue from inside the doll's head. I also need to remove her wolf ears. I very carefully use an X-Acto knife to cut the thankfully soft vinyl. My plan is to save these ears and just change the placement rather than sculpt new ears for this doll. I saw Delightful do this for one of her fairy dolls, and I wasn't going to argue with getting to do a custom with no sculpting. Then it was time to remove her factory face paint. As always, I use 100% pure acetone nail polish remover to do so. This time I focus on her eyes more than anything and leave her teeth colored so I won't have to repaint them later. Afterwards, I'll be washing her thoroughly in warm soapy water so the acetone doesn't eat away at the vinyl. That's pretty much all I can do for this project without having a body, so it was time to bring another doll in. I want the pink fairy to have a shorter body mold, so I'll be using this Howleen wolf body. Obviously, her skin doesn't quite match, so we will have to fix that. I pop off Howleen's head, put it to the side in case I ever need it for a different custom, and bust out my pastels. Paint would be much quicker, but it is also more prone to chipping off at the joints, so slow and steady it is. I apply the chalk pastel with an old makeup brush all over the doll's body, save for her stomach. This way I have a place to hold the doll without messing anything up. Her dress will cover this unmatched portion, so it won't be a problem in the end. This is what the doll looks like after layer 1. Not much change yet. As I said, this will be a slow process. In between each layer of pastel, I spray the doll with MSC to allow me to keep building up pigment. And after many, many layers, this is the final match. The stomach patch that isn't color matched was for utility, but it's also pretty cool to be able to see the before and after so clearly. Then we can simply pop the newly matched head and body together and get to work on the wig cap. Due to the holes in the pink fairy's head where her ears were, I can't go the reroot route, so instead y'all get to enjoy some everyday doll customizing horror content. Seriously, it's so funny how creepy this hobby looks. To start the wig, I wrap cling film around the doll's head to protect it from glue and secure with a rubber band around her neck. Then I repeat that step, but with fabric. If you saw my videos on the purple fairy, you'll know that the fabric I have here is technically a little thick. When making doll wig caps, the thinner the fabric, the better. But I already have this, and I don't want it to go to waste. After getting rid of as many wrinkles as possible, it's time for Mod Podge. I apply a thin layer of the glue all over the portion of the fabric that will become the wig cap, making sure to fully saturate it and not miss any spots. Once this layer dries, I'll come back and do 1 or 2 more layers to really solidify the cap. With all the layers dry, I get to come back and peel the fabric cap off the doll's head and away from the cling film. This part is so satisfying. Then I need to trim off the excess fabric. I start cutting slowly as I can always cut more, but it would be a real pain to have to start over if I cut too much. I also cut 2 little half circles to make room for her ears, and that completes the wig cap. Next up is arguably the most fun part of this custom, the hair. I have this super curly doll hair that we will be gluing to the wig cap. On the purple fairy, I did the same thing but with yarn, and I adored the process. I'm happy to say that this was just as much fun. I don't need the hair to be super long, so I cut each piece in half. Then I just take a couple strands at a time and hot glue them to the wig cap at the midway point of the strands. After much repetition, this is what she looks like with a full head of hair. She will need a bit of a trim, but we will save that for the last step. That brings us to the face. As has become the norm for me, I'll just be using acrylic paints. I start off by blocking in the whites of her eyes to help me establish their shape. Then I start in on her eyebrows. The paint here looks white, but I promise it's a light pink. I want her brows to be short and thick, with little to no tail. Next, I add just a hint of color to her lips. For some reason, it doesn't really show up in this footage, but I promise it's there. Also, as always, I find I'm really bad at narrating this part. I'm trying to leave in more footage of the face up proper though, so let me know if y'all prefer more or less footage on this step. I go in and add a brighter pink to the eyebrows to make them pop a bit more. Off camera, I added some pastel to the doll's cheeks, but due to her dark complexion, the pastel pretty much just disappeared, so instead I use a tiny bit of sponge to dab on paint and then blot it out with my fingertip to add blush. Now we get to add in irises. Her eyes will be, predictably, pink. However, since pink is just a light red, I do feel like during some stages of this face up she got some of that creepy red eye vibe. I'm trying to diminish it as much as I can because I do want her to look cute rather than creepy. I also decided to give her a side glance. I think, combined with the smile, it makes it look like something fun has caught her attention from the corner of her eye. Then, of course, it's details, details, and more details. Of course, I can't forget about some fluffy pink eyelashes. And with a couple of eye shines, that's the face. That means it's dress time. Obviously, since the pink fairy is the flower fairy, her dress will be made from flower petals. Technically, fake flower petals. I have a couple of different fake flowers to pull petals from, one of which is actually a flower left over from my wedding. For the bust of her dress, I simply cut down a petal to the appropriate size, fold it in half, and glue it directly to the doll. Would it maybe be better artistry for me to sew this? Yes. Can I? Not confidently, so glue it is. I also completely forgot to mention, but I clearly did glue her ears on. I did decide to paint the top a slightly darker pink for more contrast. For the bottom half of the dress, I start with a layer of the lighter, bigger pink petals. Then I add something that wasn't present in my concept art, but that I think will add some really cool flair to this doll. Feathers. I felt like feathers would be a cool way to add a bit of bulk and texture to the dress. I want the bottom to be very fluffy, and this just seemed like a good idea. So I glue on a feathered ribbon around and around her waist until I am satisfied. Of course, she is the pink flower fairy, not the pink feather fairy, so I add another layer of petals on top of the feathers. This helps with the theme and also just adds an extra layer of poofiness. At this point, the feathers are a little bit overwhelming, so I give them a trim to tie it together better. RIP my vacuum after this. To finish out the dress, I tie a piece of green embroidery thread under her bust, and then use pastels to add a bit of detail to the larger, lighter petals. I do want to add some embellishments, so I prepare some tiny flowers with nail art decor. I have 2 sizes of white flowers, and I use Mod Podge to glue itty-bitty gold beads to the centers for a little more detail. Using glue, I take some more of the green embroidery thread and wrap tendrils around the fairy's legs and arms for some pizzazz. Once they are dried and secure, I'll be adding the flowers on top. The last thing on the to-do list is a very important one, making the wings. I take some craft foam, fold it in half, and then cut out the shape of the pink fairy's wings. Luckily, she has very simple wing design compared to some others in this series. I then promptly messed up the foam wings while painting them and had to redo the last step, but with canvas paper instead. I think this material actually works better, so it was very much a happy accident. I use a simple Sharpie to draw on the design for the wings. And after gluing down the wings and wig, the doll is done. I am very happy to be able to introduce you to Penelope, the pink flower fairy. Unlike literally every other doll in this series, making her was relatively painless, which was a really great way to round out the project. Not that I didn't enjoy making every doll, but I specifically had a ton of fun making Penelope. It's very hard for me to pin down a favorite from the series because I do like things about each and every doll, but Penelope has a certain charm to her that I find particularly enjoyable. I've said this in a lot of videos for the Rainbow Fairy dolls, but this was a really cool experience because I feel like I learned a lot and grew a lot from doll 1 to doll 7. There are tons of ideas sitting in a list on my notes app for what sorts of custom dolls to do next, but I'm always happy to add more. Obviously, I would love to hear what you guys think of this conclusion to the Rainbow Fairy series with Penelope, but I would also love for y'all to let me know what sorts of dolls you would like to see me make next. These custom videos aren't my most popular, and I do understand that. I feel like most people follow me for content relating to dolls that are coming out that everyone can buy, rather than dolls that I'm making for myself, which is totally fine. But I do just want to say a special thank you to everyone who has been following along this project and supporting the art that I make. I hope you had fun with me and Penelope today. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys!